I was targeted. I was set up. I was incarcerated. I am Cheryl D. Glenn. This is Cheryl Speaks.
Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race for the state of Maryland. We have two main candidates in the primary, David Trone and Angela Also Brooks. David Trone is a member of the House of Representatives now. He's our congressman for the 6th District. He was elected originally January 3rd. No, he started serving January 3rd of 2019. He's all in. If he loses this race, he's out. That's important to understand. He's very progressive. A lot of people have said that he's much more progressive than Angela Also Brooks. He really focuses on mental health issues, substance abuse issues, returning citizens, incarcerated people. He's hired at least 1,400 returning citizens for his company, which is Total Wine and More, that he started from scratch. I hear people say he's buying the race. Well, what would you do if you were in it to win it and you had the resources? Spend it. Spend your money to win the race. He's not taking any money from any unions, PACs, any corporations. None of that. He has always said that he wants to be independent. The pharmaceutical industry has lobbyists big time. They paid them a lot of money. He's not taking money from any of them, because how best can you fight against the pharmaceutical industry if you're taking money from their lobbyists? So he's totally independent. He's an outspoken member of our federal team to support the full federal funding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The collapse of that bridge was devastating, not just to Baltimore, not just to Maryland, but to the whole nation, because the importance of our port of Baltimore, which is the second largest port in the entire country. He's been endorsed by the Maryland State Teachers Association, which is very important. That's the well sought after Apple endorsement. It takes a lot to get their endorsement. He has it. He has the support and endorsement of many of the unions. I'm a union person. I was a former union president. I started a union, the City Union of Baltimore, from a mustard seed thought, representing 8,000 city employees in 1988. He has a great number of people in Congress right now endorsing him and supporting him, including Hakeem Jeffries, who is positioned to be the first black Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries. He's also supported by current and former state elected officials, especially the Latinas. Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick is the first Latina chair of a standing committee in the Maryland General Assembly, and she is supporting him. Ana Sol Gutierrez from El Salvador, she was the first Latina ever elected to the Maryland General Assembly. She's supporting him. Not to mention our Attorney General of the state of Maryland, Anthony Brown, and many others. Now let's talk about Angela Also Brooks. She's the county executive for Prince George's County. She began her tenure December 3rd, 2018. Now if she loses the Senate race, she will still be the county executive because she's not out of her second term yet. So she's not in it to win it. Well, she's in it to win it, but she doesn't lose her current position if she loses the Senate race. Now she's endorsed by a boatload of the Maryland Democratic Party. The machine has gotten behind her lock, stock, and barrel, including our newly elected governor, Wes Moore. I don't know how you feel about endorsements, but I just wanted to let you know both of them and who's endorsed them. Now, it's also important to understand that she is not endorsed by the Maryland State Teachers Association. She did not get the Apple endorsement. Question is why? When a large majority of the members of MSEA, the Maryland State Education Association, are in Prince George's County. They live in Prince George's County, and they're not endorsing her. But here's the big thing to remember about this Senate race. that a lot of people get confused. You have to think with your brain, not with your heart. Yes, she would be creating history. I'm a proud black Democrat, a proud black woman who was elected to office. And I will tell you this, Angela also Brooks cannot beat Larry Hogan statewide. Larry Hogan, it was brilliant. The Republicans played a brilliant trump card, and I use that word loosely. If you play pinochle, you know what I mean, or spades when you talk about trumps. The Republicans played a brilliant card when Mitch McConnell called Larry Hogan, got him in the race on the last day of filing. And why? Because Larry Hogan is the only Republican in the state of Maryland who could potentially win this race. Why is it important to the Republicans? Because if Larry Hogan wins this Senate race, then the Republicans will have the control of the U.S. Senate. You talk about all of the issues that are important to us. You know, Roe versus Wade, abortion rights, mental health issues, the Supreme Court justices and the appointments, not only to Supreme Court, but to the federal courts. It is hugely important, and not to mention the budget of the whole country. It's hugely important that we do not turn over the control of the U.S. Senate to the Republicans from the state of Maryland. That would be shameful when the majority of the voters in the state of Maryland are Democrats. First of all, that would be embarrassing. But David Trone can beat Larry Hogan. I know everybody doesn't believe in the polls, but polls are a very strong indicator of where people are when you look at the race being 4 weeks away. Early voting starts on May the 2nd. The primary is May the 14th. That's do or die day. If they end 8 p.m., that's it. On May the 14th, the cards will be cast, the votes will be cast. We will know that night who wins the primary. And I will tell you, David Trone is a self-made millionaire. He can beat Larry Hogan because after the primary, the focus then turns to the general election. That's when people will begin to understand. And why? Because the education factor will come into play. David Trone is going to make sure that people understand that we can't afford to roll the dice with Larry Hogan. There are people who loved him as governor. He enjoys, still almost a 70% approval rating. Because there are people who loved him as governor. I don't understand why. But there are people who love him and thought he did a great job as governor. Well, this is not a state race. He is not running for the governor of the state of Maryland. This is national politics. Let's not forget that Larry Hogan said multiple times that he was not interested in going into the U.S. Senate or into Congress. He didn't want to be one of many and fighting among, other colleagues to get things done. He didn't want any parts of that. Mitch McConnell called him. He actually admitted that publicly. I heard him say it on a radio talk show. He had to admit it because it's public information. Mitch McConnell called him and convinced him to run. Brilliant. Let's not lead with our hearts. Let's lead with our brains and understand that this is too important to roll the dice. I'm supporting David Trone, lock, stock, and barrel. And I hope you'll join me because I want to make sure that Maryland stays blue and we do not turn over the U.S. Senate to the Republicans. I hope you'll join me in voting for David Trone. If you need any additional information, it's all on the website, so you can look it up. But also, hey, send me an email, call me. He's got a campaign office in every major jurisdiction. So you can call the campaign offices. Somebody will get back to you. Now, let's talk about this real hotly contested race for mayor in the city of Baltimore. This is hot to trot. We have the incumbent Brandon Scott running for his first re-election. We have former Mayor Sheila Dixon running to regain her seat as mayor of the city of Baltimore. We have Thiru Vignaraja, who's run twice before. He ran 4 years ago for mayor, and he ran 4 years before that to be state's attorney. He lost both races. And we also have Bob Wallace. Interesting enough, Bob Wallace ran 4 years ago as an independent. He wasn't interested in the primary. He just wanted to compete in the general. He was also, not only was he an independent, he was a registered Republican at one time. He's a very successful businessman. Some people wonder where he really lives. He says he's from Cherry Hill. I've been involved in politics in the city of Baltimore actively since 1983. This is 2024. I've never seen Bob Wallace involved in any political issues in the city of Baltimore until he decided to run for mayor 4 years ago. He lost the race and he disappeared. We didn't hear from him anymore until he decided to run for mayor this time. Now let's talk about, and let me just say this. When you look at where's he getting his money, he loaned himself the money to run for mayor. So most of his campaign money that he has on hand comes from a loan that he made to himself. Let's talk about Brandon Scott. I've lived in Baltimore City all of my life. Again, actively involved in politics since 1983. And I live in the district where Brandon Scott served as city councilman. The 2nd district, 2nd City Council District. I know Brandon Scott. I knew him before he got elected to anything, when he was working for Rec and Parks. When Stephanie Rawlings Blake cut a deal with Nick Diadamo to get him elected to the Baltimore City Council when she knew that Nick Diadamo was going to retire. And why do I know this? Because I ran against Nick Diadamo for City Council. And Stephanie Rawlings Blake was scared to death that I was going to run for that seat once Nick Diadamo retired. So she had to get somebody that she felt more comfortable with to be city council person representing the 2nd district. So she tapped Brandon Scott, who was working for the city at the time. That's fine. I don't have anything personal against any of these people. It takes a lot to you put yourself forth as a candidate for any political office. So nothing I say is personal. This is business, not personal. So with Brandon Scott, if you look at Baltimore City right now, I don't know how anybody could feel good about electing him to a 2nd term. Because our school system, our crime, those are the 2 main factors that people look at when they look at where do they want to move or buy a home, especially if you have school-aged children. You look at education and you look at crime. Our schools right now are funded to the tune of the 3rd highest funded school system in the country. But what are the results? I'm sorry. Our children are not learning at the progress rate that should be reflecting the money that's being put into education. I served as a state delegate for 13 years, so I supported the Kerwin Commission, which is the new formula that dictates how much money the state will invest in education, as well as how much money each local jurisdiction are required to invest in education. Brandon Scott, in a debate last night on WBAL, it was held at Morgan State University, but it was covered on television by WBAL. And he's very, very proud to say that he funds education at a higher rate than any other mayor. He says it almost like he did this on his own. No, that was done by the Maryland General Assembly, the people that you elect as delegates and senator, and signed by the governor of the state. It is not the mayor of Baltimore City, any of the county executives, any of them. It is the state legislature that controls that. Also, he talks very proudly about building new schools. Again, that's not a state. That wasn't done by the city. That was done by the state legislature. I'm very proud of the work that we did when I was a state delegate, to make sure that we built new schools to help our children feel proud of their educational facilities. And we still have a long way to go in Baltimore City. But that wasn't a Brandon Scott initiative. 1/3 of the formula of the funding for the school system for Baltimore City Public Schools comes from Baltimore City. The lion's share comes from the state. That's not rumor, that's fact. So let's talk about who's funding Brandon Scott. I will tell you who some of his notable donors are. MCB Real Estate, the company that's redeveloping Harbor Place, owned by David Bramble. No wonder he supports their plan. Not only the principal owner, but the staffers. And I will tell you how that works. There is a limit that any entity, any person can give to a candidate for office. In the state of Maryland, it's $6,000. So what happens? You own a company, you kick out $6,000. You get your staff people to kick out individually $6,000 here, $6,000 there. It may not always be $6,000. $1,000 here, $500 there, $2,000 here. Whatever it is, it's the same entity investing in the same candidate. We have Michael and Nathalie Beatty of Beatty Development Group, Michael Hess of Hess Construction, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Hello. The reason I laugh at that is because recently, and Tharu Vignaraja actually has it in his commercial. I don't know if you remember the fight with BGE that homeowners had. I was one of them. I had this ugly ass external regulator in my front yard right now. BG&E took me through fire. They threatened me to turn off my gas and electricity if I didn't allow them to come in my home. They drilled a hole through the ceiling in my basement. Now, they fixed it because I made sure they did. They dug up the grass in the front yard, not just the front yard, but even in the median strip. They had to bust up the concrete. Do you think they moved a bush that had been in my front from the time my husband and I bought this house in 1990? They said, oh, we'll replace it. Where's the bush? It's not there. And they never came back. They put substandard grass in my front. So I'm saying all of that to say that there were a group of ladies in Federal Hill that said, no, y'all not doing that shit down here. We're going to fight you because we know what our rights are. There was an older gentleman who was, they were really threatening him. He was intimidated. He was scared. He was nervous. He's got medical issues. So his neighbors got together and said that they were going to have a press conference, and they did. And they said, we're not going to allow you to do this to our community, to insist on putting these ugly external regulators in our front. And what happened? Tharu Vignaraja got involved because they beat his door down and asked him for his help, pro bono. So one day, and look this information up, BG&E came, they sent a whole battery of police officers, command staff, down to police officers. They had all of these police there to deal with this small group of women, I think it was 3 or 4 of them, who said they weren't going to allow BG&E to forcefully put up these external regulators, the first one being at this older gentleman's house. You know what BG&E did? They called Brandon Scott. They called Brandon Scott. It's unbelievable. It's laughable that they felt that comfortable to call the mayor of the city of Baltimore. And what did he do? He sent the force in. Those ladies were arrested. Now compare that to what happened in the Brooklyn Day Massacre, when 30 people were shot, 2 were killed. In the Brooklyn Homes Massacre, where they had their annual party, people were calling the police. Safe Streets was there. Nobody came. They didn't send a battery of police there. The police said, we didn't know, what was going on. They lied. They knew what was going on. Safe Streets knew what was going on. That's the mayor's flagship public safety entity, operated out of Monzi, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Security. I'm telling you, when you compare Brooklyn Homes, what happened there, that tragedy, and they couldn't get the police to come. People were calling 911. But then BG&E calls because a couple of ladies were protesting quietly, They weren't causing a ruckus like you had in Brooklyn. But they sent the force, and they arrested those ladies. So, this is the kind of leadership that Brandon Scott provides. Not to mention that he absolutely supports the CEO of the Baltimore City Public School System, Sonia Santelises. Now, I don't. I believe when you're making almost $500,000 of taxpayer money, if you were in private industry and the results of your leadership was what her results have been since she's been in Baltimore City Public Schools, you'd be fired. You'd be fired, really. No, not only is he not looking to not sign her new contract, well, he wouldn't be the one signing the contract, it would be the school board. But guess what? He appoints 7 of the 9 school board members. So who controls them? The person who appoints them. We need an elected school board, but that's a discussion issue for another day. But Brandon Scott supports Sonia Santelises. We all know, those of us who live in Baltimore know, that if Brandon Scott is reelected mayor, Sonia Santelises will still continue to run our school system. And I'm not saying that none of our children are being successful. Some are. We have excellent educators, and thank God for them. We have people in our school system who care, the teachers. And if you know any of them, ask them about the problems they have with the leadership of the school system. It's horrible, the things that they have to put up with. But that's Brandon Scott. We just got recycling back weekly last month. Ironic when you look at the fact that we're right here at the election time. We've been crying about recycling being every other week and garbage pickup once a week. Baltimore City is labeled as the dirtiest city in the country, but he's proud of that. And drive through our streets. I dare you to drive through the streets of Baltimore and not be ready to cuss sometimes because you've hit a pothole that you didn't expect. It is terrible. He could have used some of that ARPA money to redo the streets. I mean, it's horrible. And then when you look at the complete streets fiasco with the bike lanes, oh my God. The bike lanes are terrible. We have North Avenue, 1 lane going east, 1 lane coming west, all the way from Howard Street to Milton Avenue. That is ridiculous. I'm an East Baltimore native. North Avenue was 2 lanes each way. Now you have people almost having accidents because they don't know how to turn, where to turn, because of these crazy bike lanes. It's dangerous. And 33rd Street, the same thing. 28th Street, the same thing. I'm proud of the people in the Gwynns Falls community because they said, no, you're not doing this stuff over here. We are homeowners. We've been here, invested in our community for all of these years. You didn't even talk to us. You didn't even give us the respect to ask us, is this what we want? And when you hear Brandon Scott and those people who support the bike lanes issue, you're talking about bike more. Ask how many African Americans are on their board. And which communities did they talk to and when? We were the last city hall to open after COVID in the whole country. The last city hall. And that was because of force. The public got tired of not being able to talk to their representatives, to go to a Board of Estimates meeting. No, you're a taxpayer. You're paying the highest property taxes in the state of Maryland. I'm saying all of that to say, I don't think Brandon Scott deserves a second term at all. You got former Mayor Dixon running, Sheila Dixon. Now, this is the first time, and I've known Sheila Dixon since I started the City Union of Baltimore in 1988. We have been political friends for many years. I have never not supported Sheila Dixon and any of her campaigns. I'm not supporting her this time. Because you know what? There's an old saying, when you dance to the piper, you got to pay. You know, you got to pay. The person who pulls the purse strings or the person who pulls your strings. And her campaign is being funded by a super PAC that was established for the purpose of supporting her candidacy solely. It's collected more than $600,000 so far in donations, most of which came from real estate developer John Jake Lukemeyer Jr. and David Smith, the chairman of Sinclair Broadcasting and new owner of the Baltimore Sun. You know what's funny? When people got all upset because Sinclair Broadcasting now owns the Baltimore Sun and talked about, especially African Americans, said, I'm not going to, buy the Sun paper anymore. I'm going to end my subscription. But then how could you support Sheila Dixon? And that's who's funding her. And I'm sorry, you could see what's going on. You could see Eric Costello is there with her at almost everything. Eric Costello is the city council representative for the 11th district. So why is he with her at everything? You would have to be Ray Charles not to see the handwriting on the wall. There's a plan afoot. And I don't believe Sheila Dixon is going to be able to manage the city like she would if she were not being funded by, these sources. I would tell you, Fox 45, and I respect all of the media, but we all know what happens with Fox 45 and the African American community, Sinclair Broadcasting. That's who is funding Sheila Dixon. That's why I said, not this time. I can't roll with you this time, my sister, because I want to make sure that if you are going to be the African American mayor for the city of Baltimore, and I'm not saying that you have to just be concerned about African American issues, but you have to look through your lens at all times with black consciousness, because we know what our fight and plight, we know what it's been for many years, many years. And the fight that we still but the fight that we still engage in for equity. And again, the marijuana issue, that's all about equity. That's a discussion for another day. So I guess you said, well, Cheryl, who are you supporting? Tharu Vignarajah. And I would tell you this. I told him to his face. I said, Tharu, I never thought I would live to see the day where I would not only support you, but just even have a conversation with you. But I didn't really know him. Now, he's made some mistakes, but so have we all. his mistakes, though, were personal mistakes. But when you talk to him, when you listen to his plan for Baltimore, when you talk about public safety, when you talk about education, when you talk about the Harbor Place redevelopment, and he is not in support of the current plan that's being pushed, I am very impressed. He has some very creative ideas that are doable. They are really doable. He's a smart guy. And I'm willing to give him a chance to see, are you going to live up to what you're saying? If not, 4 years later, then you'll be on the chopping block. Just like they have always done in D.C. If they don't like you, they get rid of you. We don't have to keep people for a legacy career. But I'm supporting Thuroo Vigdaraja because he is the only person to ever run for the mayor of Baltimore City on a public financing campaign. What does that mean? That means that he cannot accept money from PACs, corporations, lobbyists. He cannot accept donations more than $150. So he has successfully garnered the level of donations at $150 and less. Most would be at less. $75, $50, $25, what have you. And so he's been able to qualify for the level of public financing money available. You have to qualify for it. But what does that mean? That means that he don't owe nobody nothing except the people of the city of Baltimore. Because for public financing campaigns, you have to live in the city of Baltimore. He can accept other money from people in Baltimore County or what have you, but you have to make sure that you record that, and that doesn't qualify you for not one dime of public financing money. Only the money that you get from people who live in the city of Baltimore qualifies you for public campaign financing money. So that's how he's funding his campaign. I'm impressed because that means that me and other people like me who live in the city will, for the first time in a very long time, feel like we have an equal partner sitting in the seat of the mayor at City Hall. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. And I hope you'll join me and think outside of the box. This race is not just about Brandon Scott and Sheila Dixon, as the media would have you believe. No, it's not. There are a lot of people who feel like they didn't want to support Sheila because of her past discretions. So they were on board with Brandon Scott initially. Then there are people who were supporting Sheila because they know the bad shape that our city is in. And so they didn't want to support Brandon Scott. So they gravitated towards Sheila. But there is another choice. There's a real choice out there, and that's Thuroo Vigdaraja. And I would just ask you to give him a shot and see what he can do. Now, the last race that I want to talk about is the president of the Baltimore City Council. This is a very important election. This person will be a heartbeat away from being mayor. And let's not forget that 3 times in the past 10 years, we've had maybe it's 12 years, we've had the person who was sitting in the seat of president of the city council ascend to the seat of mayor for different reasons. And so when you think about who do I want, who could I stomach as the next mayor of Baltimore, you got to look at the big picture. You really do. Now, you have the incumbent, Nick Mosby, running. You have former council member Shannon Sneed running. And you have council member Zeke Cohen running. He's the sitting city council representative for the 1st District. Zeke Cohen was elected to the city council in 2016 to the 1st District. I know that a lot of people in his district were not going to support him to be reelected to his city council seat. I know that I'm not saying that he wouldn't have won it, because it's a lot more difficult to unseat an incumbent, but it wasn't going to be a cakewalk for him. I am very unimpressed with some of the people who Zeke Cohen are friendly with. I'm very concerned about his scruples when it comes to supporting people who show themselves not to be concerned about the majority of Baltimore City, and only concern themselves with their small ethnic populations in certain districts. I have never seen Zeke Cohen do anything that impressed me as a city council member that would make me comfortable with electing him as president of the city council. And remember, the person that sits in the seat of the president of city council controls, well, not controls, the mayor controls, but he or she chairs the Board of Estimates. That's very important. The Board of Estimates controls all the contracts in the city of Baltimore. They let all the contracts. In fact, they had the purse strings. Now, the mayor controls the Board of Estimates because he has 3 people appointed to the Board of Estimates, 2 including himself. And then you have the comptroller, and then you have the president of the city council. And then let's talk about Shannon Sneed. I helped Shannon Sneed get elected the first time she ran and got elected in 2016. I even helped her before then when she ran against sitting council person Warren Branch. You know, I did a lot to help her in her campaigns. She served 1 term. She was elected in 2016, and after 4 years, she decided to run for president of the city council in 2020. She was not successful 4 years ago. She ran for lieutenant governor alongside Tom Perez in 2022. That wasn't successful. She is using public campaign financing for her race this time. So that kudos to her for that. But I told Shannon when I talked to her, and I will tell you, experience matters, in my opinion. After serving 1 term as city council as city council representative in the 13th district, I thought it was not wise for her to leave that position and run for president of the city council. I thought she should have continued to develop herself more if she had higher aspirations. Develop herself more, take on bigger issues in the city council before running for city council president. So let's look at Nick Mosby. And we all know the story of Nick and Marilyn Mosby. Nick has been in political office since 2011. He was a former city council member before he went to the Maryland House of Delegates. I served with Nick, in the Maryland House of Delegates. We worked together fighting for Baltimore when it came to the Preakness and getting the funding to make sure that the state supported the Preakness and Pimlico in a way that benefited the community. Nick was a very important part of that fight. So he's been back in the city council now, and he's running for president. As city council president. He won in 2020. So he's finishing up his 4-year term as president. I'm supporting Nick Mosby. Now, when we look at Nick and Marilyn Mosby, and you can have the opinions, whatever your opinions are about their personal situation, Nick has never been charged with a crime, even to this day. If he were going to be charged with a crime, I think they would have done that by now. So I think that ship has sailed. He's not going to be charged with a crime. He's made some personal mistakes, but again, you show me a person that's got blood flowing through their veins that hasn't made a personal mistake. But I like what his future goals and aspirations are for the city council and for the board of estimates. I'm all in. I'm supporting Nick. I think he deserves another term. You know, I think when people make mistakes, a lot of times it makes you a better person because you learn from those mistakes. You get embarrassed, you get ridiculed, people talk about you. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt in every color. But Nick Mosby, I think, deserves a second term as president of the city council, and I hope you'll join me. Next time we meet, I'm going to talk about my story. It's a story you want to hear, all about marijuana in the state of Maryland. I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll like and subscribe and share and all of that good stuff. Get everybody involved in Cheryl Speaks. I'm on board, unbossed. Nobody controls me anymore. There's nothing they can threaten me with. I have the microphone. I'm going to tell it like it is. Thank you.